Hello and welcome to the Tonearm, where we connect you with the people and ideas moving culture forward. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today we're celebrating the inaugural Jazz Forward Award winners from the website All About Jazz. Since 1995, All About Jazz has been a driving force for jazz discovery. Now they're recognizing industry trailblazers who actively promote jazz awareness and culture. We'll hear from 4 organizations reshaping how jazz connects with audiences worldwide. Ed Trefzger from JazzWeek tracks radio airplay across North America, giving artists and their teams vital exposure information. Jesús Perezagua's Oh Jazz streams live performances from clubs globally, bringing the world's jazz rooms to your screen of choice. Thomas Marriott's Seattle Jazz Fellowship revives local jazz culture through community-based programming. And Eddie Lee's Sligo Jazz Project transforms an Irish town into Europe's most inclusive jazz education festival each summer. All of these organizations tackle different challenges, from measuring impact to building community to educating the next generation. Together, they show how jazz thrives through innovation and dedication. Let's get started with JazzWeek's Ed Trefzger, who helps artists and their teams understand the reach of their music through radio airplay data. I'm hoping by way of getting started, you could tell listeners a little bit about your organization, your mission, and how you got started.
JazzWeek's mission is to put together a tabulation of airplay on jazz radio stations, mostly in the US, but a couple in Canada, to help artists know what kind of a reach they have and to help out promoters who are working with them. It got started in 2001 and actually got its genesis at the old IAJE, International Association for Jazz Education Convention in '01 in New York City. And at the time, there was some buzz that maybe the Gavin Report, which was a radio industry publication that had a number of different formats that it did airplay charts for. The rumor was that jazz and smooth jazz also with it would be going away. And so I got started on some of the background stuff with the idea, well, we'll have maybe something there, maybe even something to compete with it. And by July of 2001, Gavin announced that they were going to discontinue those charts. And so by August of 2001, we got started. And then about 3 weeks later, 9/11 hit, and we didn't know what was going to happen. But there were some changes along the way, and changes even in the number of stations broadcasting jazz, some of which happened in the aftermath of 9/11 as more stations converted to all news on the non-commercial end. You know, here we are almost 25 years later, still tabulating chart data, still seeing what stations like, and still seeing how the radio programmers who are really good tastemakers for their audiences, how they decide what the best music is.
So I don't make any assumptions, or so that listeners don't have to do any guesswork. What's the importance of that work, either from a B2B point of view, or which of the stakeholders are using and needing this information?
Well, when we started out, it was mostly record labels who had in-house promotion people, and there was a mix of independent promoters at the time. But that's gradually moved to the point where there are all independent promoters, plus individual artists and also publicists trying to get a measure. But the main thing is to get an idea if a record is being played, because the job of the promoter is to get the recorded music played on the stations with the hope that will spur some album and CD sales, and maybe a little bit of that now, but also some streaming audio play, all of which creates some income for somebody somewhere. But it's also a way for artists to get some publicity for themselves, maybe help them book gigs or get put on the roster of festivals and so forth. But without some sort of an independent measuring tool, the work that the promoters do doesn't really get measured.
And what's the business model?
The business model is really a very part-time thing for me, but essentially the record promoters, the independent promoters who work with stations and try to get the music on the air, pay a fee for the data that they get. So they have a monthly or quarterly subscription that gets them all the reports from the stations and a listing week by week, some things they can download and so forth. So basically, radio stations supply the data in return for getting music. I tabulate the data, and the promoters pay a subscription fee to access it.
It must be very interesting to sort of sit behind all of this Airplay data. To the extent that you have any anecdotes, could you talk a little bit about the trends you see in terms of what gets Airplay versus what gets released? What the data tells you in terms of like, are there surprising patterns, or do things pop out that are non-intuitive?
After this many years, not too much surprises me, but there are some patterns that you can see. One that I would love to do a panel on at a conference would be to have a couple of radio programmers, really good music directors, and a couple of really good music writers and reviewers, and have them talk about what it is that they really like. Because what we find is that radio audiences are a bit different than maybe the hardcore jazz magazine reader and so forth. You do have a kind of a core jazz radio audience that's really into just about anything. But then you have maybe a broader audience who like jazz, but they're not really going to go into the more adventurous stuff. And granted, you got to also consider what time of day it is. Maybe somebody who's working at their office at 10 a.m. can't get really avant-garde, but a melodic hard bop tune is going to fit just right, and or maybe some piano trio stuff or whatever. So that's one of the tendencies that we see. Something that I don't think we see as much, but still do some, is some regional differences too. Some parts of the country are more into Latin jazz than others. Places in the Northeast and the Midwest seem more receptive for organ trios than other areas. And that's maybe a relic, or maybe just a historical thing about what was popular, or maybe as people have migrated. A really good vocalist will have some staying power at the top of the chart, probably more than instrumentals. I think it's because vocals are a little bit more recognizable for people. But in general, I think it's the jazz music that is artistically sound and also accessible to people. Maybe a melody that they can grab a hold of. That's the kind of thing that really works well on jazz radio.
What were you doing before this, Ed? Like, were you a data nerd somewhere? Were you a broadcaster? What brought you, what made you the person to do this?
I've never done this full time, so I'll start out with that. So the way it got started really was about 5 years before we launched. My former business partner, Tony Gasperi, was a jazz music director, and he would go to maybe a Jazz Times conference or the Gavin conference. And one of the things that everybody noticed is that people would come home from a conference, and all that momentum and all the high from seeing everybody would just kind of fade away after a couple of weeks. So at the time, we had a nascent internet company. And so we set up, actually on an old Mac SE30, we set up some fairly primitive mailing list software, but started a discussion list around 1996. So there was already a community of, maybe 100 or 150 people at that time in radio that were exchanging ideas and so forth. And so they were the ones who said, hey, you guys really ought to think about doing this chart, because there may not be one. And if we don't have a chart, we don't have a promotion business. And if we don't have a promotion business, nobody's going to get records. So that's kind of where it went from. I went into the internet business after about 14 years as a mechanical engineer, and out of the internet business, I've gotten back into radio. And so kind of my day job is managing a small radio group in Western New York, plus some college hockey coverage, including play-by-play on the radio. So I got a lot of hats that I wear.
Tell me a little bit about how you think about not only the state, but the future of radio a little bit more broadly than just for JazzWeek. Like, are you bullish on radio? Is it a managed decline? How should I think about radio in 2025 and going forward?
Well, when you talk to the people in a small industry group of independent broadcasters I belong to, they're very bullish. But the thing that they say is that you've got to really serve your local community. You can't try to be like a streaming service. And, I think of things like I remember several years ago when Ross Porter was running CJRT in Toronto, he talked about how the goal of that station was to be a radio station for Toronto whose format was jazz. So they played they played great jazz, but then they also connected to the arts community and so forth. And I think when you see stations do that, it's great. And that makes them relevant.
Yeah.
Right where I live in Rochester, New York, WGMC just won an award from the New York State Broadcasters Association for a project they did to get people to donate new or lightly used radios to provide to nursing homes and memory care facilities. And that's a case of that. Stations get involved in festivals and live broadcasts and program production. So they all stay relevant in their communities. And as the distribution has gone from just out of a transmitter to streaming, apps are a big part of it and video production from them. So you kind of have to evolve with the times. But if you're going to just be a jukebox, then you become irrelevant. But if you really reach where you broadcast and where you serve, then you should stay relevant.
Yeah. What about, at least in America, what about the reality of the public broadcasting situation? Do you see that having a particular or outsized impact on our genre, or are we in the same boat with other compatriots? How do you think about that?
I was concerned when things were first cut, but then I've seen stations do a pretty good job of filling the gap with some fundraising efforts. And I know it's a struggle for some still. It's also interesting to see the range of stations too, the range of budgets. You can have a station that relies a lot on volunteers that's not an NPR or CPB affiliated station that will run on a couple $100,000 a year, where you have multi-million-dollar operations in there too. So that changes a lot. In fact, that's one of the things about jazz radio that I think makes it a lot different from commercial radio or just about any format, is you have such a variety of types of stations: college stations, community stations, all staffed by volunteers, or fully professionally run large budget stations.
Going forward for JazzWeek, what do you have to do to keep going? Is it still focused on terrestrial radio? Are other types of radio, be it streaming, digital only, or online only, are they allowed to report? And how do you think about that for the future?
We do have a few online reporters. The tough part about it is what kind of a reach they have. Somebody could be an online station and be really happy if they've got 50 simultaneous streams or something like that, just to grab a number. But you could have a radio station in a relatively small town that might have a couple hundred, 300, 400, 500 people listening at a given time, up into the tens of thousands in the major market ones. So we need to make sure that a streaming station doesn't end up having an outsized impact on things. So we want to make sure they have a pretty good audience. I've also been looking at monitoring streams using a service that monitors a stream to tabulate. The problem is that that ends up being about $30 a month per station. And you get, if you get 80 or 100 stations, that's a significant amount. Making that financially realistic is tough. Plus, there are stations that may have 10 hours a week of jazz, and you're paying to monitor them all the time for those 10 hours. So that's difficult too.
Do you have to do any weighting or indexing? Like, are all reports created equal, or do you weight based on reach or DMA or anything like that?
I actually, when I was creating the software 24 years ago, put a place in there to weight stations based hopefully on some Nielsen numbers, now that they're Nielsen, used to be Arbitron. But the problem is getting access to that. Nielsen has clamped down on what they will report. You used to be able to get everybody's overall numbers from what's called Radio Research Consortium for non-commercial stations, but even that's not really available now. So there's no good way to do it. I've thought about saying it by market size, but that's not even realistic, because you could be one jazz station in a small market and have a greater percentage of the audience than in a bigger one. But we do have jazz stations with really significant ratings numbers. Even one just anecdotally I remember is WUCF in Orlando, which on its HD2 stream is all Latin jazz, and they get high enough ratings that most jazz stations would be happy with those, and that's just on their Latin channel. So I wish there was a way to do that. That might be helpful, but we just don't have a way to do it. So each spin counts the same.
Yeah, yeah. Ed, congratulations on the recognition. You've been at this for a long time, but it's a innovative service that remains innovative, and I think that's really exciting. And thank you for making time to talk to me and educate our audience on what you're up to.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it indeed was an honor and humbling to be recognized.
Now we're putting the Tonearm's needle on Jesús Perezagua, whose O Jazz platform streams live jazz performances from clubs around the world, with significant subscription revenue going directly back to artists and venues. Here's Jesús. I'd like to start with getting a little bit of an introduction to your organization, Jesús. If you could tell us what you do, what your mission is, and how you got started.
Wow, it's a challenge. Want to do it in half an hour. I can be speaking for days. It's a beautiful journey. Look, the origin of this came from an idea to capture all of the jazz that is happening every day in all the corners of the world, and it's proven to be a challenge, which is one of the best things that move us to start doing this one. We are television executives. I am the founder. And I came across to my partner in Australia, also pay television and radio executive. And all the challenges started from there. So we found the jazz completely disaggregated, things happening magically at the clubs every day in multiple corners. It's difficult to manage all of them. But then after came all the parts, is how to make the best of the quality is paramount for us. Television is audiovisual. Not only the video, the sound is critical. Also, we found that the clubs are very peculiar, very small, difficult to survive, by the way. It's a difficult business for them. They do an amazing job giving the space to the artist. And even if there's always the question of how much money is making it art, whatever, but it's on stage and it's given to them every day. So we wanted to amplify that stage, but without interfering in the club. So we develop a technology and a full orchestration to get into the club without making any kind of noise to the club and not to interfere in their life.
Yeah.
This is part of the technology. I can come later if there is time to that. So basically we connect the clubs, we make them a studio of production with very small cameras. The sound is greatly taken from the mixing board and special mixing done remotely. Everything is done remotely with 4 studios around the world. So we attend this one. And then all the challenges came along. What is the business model? We have to convince the clubs. We are television. We are not coming from the jazz industry or the music, although we have certain connections. Is how to do how to convince the clubs. As I said, a lot of pressure. How to convince them to make a studio, not compete with television, whatever. Then after to convince the artists, because nobody knew it. And they say, well, people are taking sometimes what we do and they don't respect what we do. And this is one thing we were very clear. We have a simplistic contract with them. They understand quickly. And we have a very transparent way to pay them and to contribute, which is one of the things they most appreciate. They like the transparency and the good promotion that we found for them. The promotion is as good as the money. Their passion is to play, and they are particular animals. We loved it. The more we talk to them, the more we like and get engaged in this one. So business models, of course, getting the necessary cash. So we did, in part of the journey, we financed with our own pockets. And I always say, with 110% of my time. So we dedicated myself and my partner and a beautiful team of people that we have with a lot of passion, which is the most rewarding thing in the platform. It's a big family. And this also is a very good way also to communicate with the artists and the clubs. Then we I made something magic. I make a quick pitch with all of these business models in place. A few clubs are starting in Sydney. Thank you very much for the Foundry 606 and in the Jazz Lab Tokyo with Kyoko Mama, in Madrid at Cafe Berlin. So it's starting to take form. So we said, wow, we need the cash to continue growing this one. So I made a pitch to in the market, the financial company, venture capital. And the first pitch came along. They say, we love this one. We've never seen something like this one. So we come with you. And I have a lovely venture capital based in Europe. There is accompany us to fund properly all of this production and distribution and everything. Because it's about technology, using a very peculiar technology developed by one of my companies, I investor in Spain, and it's meant to reproduce all of the content that is not possible to be produced because of there is no business model behind. So it has to be competitive, it has to be easy to use. And was a bit of a journey to take one technology and to create a product. So basically we have a beautiful orchestration, which is the most of the valuable thing, with people trained to manage the technology remotely in Sydney, Tokyo, Madrid, and Sao Paulo. They connect real time, and we can produce shows. We could be producing 10 shows, 11 shows daily, but it's too much. So they connect, we do during the rehearsal, we do all the necessary adjustments. It's beautiful. They work with in multiple languages, Portuguese, Spanish, English, Japanese, through WhatsApp. It's beautiful to see them working. We develop our own OTT platform with the same technology company. I always say it's a humble, because this world is cruel. Developing OTTs is very expensive and it's also challenging with updates and everything.
Wow.
But we gave important two things. As television executives in the paid television part is the branding. So for us, it's critical, the branding. We have invested in the best branding guys in television from all times at Fox. And we have a highly talented person that is managing from Boston. We are starting to see where we are. Boston is the graphic design with Argentine also direction. The technology is in Spain. We have people in 4 continents doing the production orchestration, and which is coming to the team. Is marketing, is Carlos supporting us in the US, relationship with the artists in London, all the finance and the management. I'm here, and I take it in Tokyo. I have to put the names here. These all the production technology in Spain, and editorial is in Sydney.
I'm curious about what a success scenario looks like for you. I mean that both for the business overall, what do you have to do to be successful? And I wonder if maybe you have a story of what success looks like for a venue or an artist.
Success for a venue or an artist? And there is this? Yeah, I think there are 2 questions here. When you relate to what is our vision or mission or what to do, yeah, we see this as a long journey. We just started. We are not driven by economic purpose, although we are very disciplined in the management of the economics, which is something we are giving support to the artists as well, because we found they don't have this kind of literacy and even sharing the bank accounts or doing their things rightly. Also, we give them with a very simplistic content, as I said before. So for us, it's a long journey, and we want to continue. The success is, of course, to continue adding more clubs, more styles. We want to capture everything that is happening in jazz world today with the right quality. It's kind of a legacy. Actually, we have already 340 shows or 50. We have over 3,000 songs because we chop all this one and we treat the content nicely with graphic design, packaging, label, everything. We want to capture more, bring in more clubs and more styles, because one of the things is our particular platform is we are not in one place. We are taking this from everywhere in the world. And it's not about the styles that we know, because just we discover, and we are really close to the artist and what is the creativity today is happening, as I said, every day. Every day is different. And every particular country and culture, they contribute with their own rhythms, their own personalities, everything. So we found the flamenco jazz, the Latin jazz, all the Afro-Cuban, Cuba, Brazil is a box of surprises every day, even in Tokyo with no particular rhythm, but amazing galleries. So it's building this long term. In that way, it's discipline and convincing the people to come along with us. It's a global platform for the people to discover this one and to appreciate. Then after the business model is a subscription based, and this is when the revenues are coming. We transform the subscribers into patrons, because 35% of the money coming directly from the subscription is not on profit. The money coming directly goes to the artists and the clubs to help them to sustain. It's a small contribution, but it's a contribution that comes along with giving the artist a wider stage, a bigger one, which is the promotion. Continue with this, giving more visibility to the artist, discovering new artists. We're not going to the usual suspect, going every day to the club. We have a studio. There are 30 shows coming to every club every month. We have the luxury to have the first beautiful curation from the club with their own style, their own people. Then we have our curator say, well, this month we pick A, B, and C. We normally do 1 to 2 shows per month. If there are 3 good, we go through it. For us, it's more quality and building up this kind of asset than quantity, as I said before. So we cherry picking and we bring in everything to one place, which is recorded, and you can use it anytime. Now, as television people, we are evolving this business from subscription, now working in the business to business. We have a really well-developed television channel, 24/7. It's a combination of all the playlists that we create with the 3,000 songs and growing every month, and the shows. So we have a 24-hour service, which is structured in a strip with a playlist and 2 shows daily. And we are conquering distribution with this one at the right price, because one important thing is we want to put their necessary value in what is the magic that happens every day at the club. And it's a unique piece. Whoever wants to see that show, they will never see it again, because it's not going to be the same. Probably never the same band, probably never the same location. And we capture in everything here. And so it's a long journey. It's the start of a long journey with 3 years, 1,500 artists on the stage for us. Clips, I cannot count it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Now we get into next things as well. And the future, it's expanding. Now that we have all the capture done, what we are working along with the artists is to give additional opportunity of money and exposure. So it's a record label. Initially going on to the vinyl collectible, we're giving the tangible thing of it. We are also now getting into the poster production. We do a beautiful poster every time we do a show, live show. And it's a good kind of way to go in the marketing, how we promote. And this poster can be printed by the artist and they can sell it themselves and signature, everything. So we want to make a completely 360. And the last initiative that is one that is driving a lot of time is we are starting to do festivals.
Wow.
We have done collaboration with festivals, but most important is to elevate the quality of the jazz, the perception of jazz, and to really identify all the diversity of the jazz. So we are creating specific franchises. The first one started last year in Japan, associating one jazz kind of style or genre, in this case is flamenco jazz, is connected with the big city of Tokyo. And we are giving an experience to the people to come to be sitting in front of, last year we brought 7 artists to Japan, aggregating 9 Latin Grammy nominations and awards. 7 people came special locations to elevate it. So we put it in the oldest Japanese Zen temple of the 13th century, and reserve it to a reduced number of people.
Wow.
Coming along with cultural experience. In this case, was with a dinner, and in this year we're preparing with an art exhibition together with for the jazz and Latin jazz creators, and doing workshops in a week with universities and schools. So it's giving experience and try to position and give the necessary value that this kind of genre and the artist deserves. because they have a terrible life. They go every day to play at the clubs.
Wow.
70% of what we have produced so far is original. So they are composers. They're not just artists executing, they are composers as well. And this is what is the journey about. We're in the middle of it.
It's incredibly ambitious. It sounds incredibly ambitious. To ask you a little bit of a more aesthetic question, I'm curious, you're in a very unique position in terms of having a view of, like you mentioned earlier, jazz styles from all over the world, but also originating them and taking them other places. And I'm wondering, is there anything you are seeing or learning about how the music translates and travels and how audiences are connecting across geography? Because that strikes me as a big part of what you're doing, is that discovery and connection.
Absolutely. Music is universal. You don't need to be in a specific place. And it's about discovering. People are curious. In particular, the jazz aficionados are highly educated in music and perception. And they have a very good eye on understanding things. Cultivated person, the profile is pretty high. And so they appreciate, basically. One of the things they like the most is the surprise effect. So, wow, I want to travel and see what's happening. Oh, look at this groovy, kind of funky style that is happening in Brazil now. Or the 25 years old pianist in Spain doing flamenco jazz like an angel. Yeah. I think it's not a barrier. The opposite is bringing more the richness. Another thing that we are doing, we are digital, but we have very strong physical component. And we have all the tentacles in all different places of the world. So we go and try and meet the artist. I go to the club here in Tokyo as much as I can. So one of the things the artists are telling us, they want to travel. And say, why you want to travel? Because they want to meet other musicians. And what it says is to learn and to share with them. So one of the things we're doing and promoting is to let the artists to come to the different locations where we are and to play with other artists. This kind of magic that happens, put in an amazing, crazy guitarist from Tokyo doing a limit of J-pop and extremely talented. With this young pianist in Sevilla, in Spain, we put it together. They play a show by knowing themselves in the meeting first time at 11 in the morning, and they play at 7 o'clock in the evening. An amazing concert. We recorded that one. And the level of appreciation, they're friends, and they are thinking of doing touring together.
Wow.
So this kind of mix of cultures, way of thinking, way of doing music is not only a privilege for the people listening to the aficionados to discover and to enjoy, it's also for the artist. And they need to continue growing themselves.
Yeah. That's so in keeping with the tradition of this music as well, right? There's always been such an oral tradition and a teaching tradition between generations. And people talk about, when you talk to musicians, they talk about how they learn on and off the bandstand from other musicians, whether it's musical technique or even how to live and how to comport yourself and how to survive on the road.
Yeah.
That network of musicians supporting other musicians has been such a part of jazz tradition. It's fascinating to see you adapting that to the 21st century. Tell me a little bit about, how can people support you? How can consumers and fans, where can people go to learn more? Tell me all the things that people need to know if they're compelled and interested in what you've talked about today.
Yeah, we have, you said you have an ambitious project. Yeah, it's ambitious, but it's humble. We know we are a humble platform. We are not crazy and doing things wrong. This is for perpetuity. This is something we want to do it forever. How the people can discover us is through our website that is managed in the best possible way. We offer 8 to 10 shows per month live that they can come and connect. We do the promotion through the artists and the clubs and our own media. We are not crazy to oversell anything that doesn't need to oversell, being oversold. It's legacy. It's something you come to watch live. If you're curious to come live, wherever you are in the world, because if the show is happening in Tokyo, it's going to be midnight, wherever in early morning in the US, the East Coast. But it's You can then after have everything on demand, or you can connect to our television channel in the cable company where you are connected in the world you are. And 35% of the money that they contribute is to support the artist and to this beautiful project. So they can discover us through multiple bases. We are trying to increase that part, being more present. We have done certain, not experiments, but nice projects in movie theaters. We've done in Spain and Canada.
Wow.
Select the shows, put it in Wednesday nights or Friday nights for the people to see something special. It's an event. We are not driving big masses of people to the theater, but it's good promotion. It's something for the people to start discovering, appreciating. We do the development in Dolby 5.1 and Dolby Atmos of selected shows, so people can go and see and do it. So how the people can do? We have the normal subscription. I mean, if they come and stay along with us, they will have a beautiful way to discover jazz, but also supporting the jazz artists and the clubs. Important, the clubs suffering a lot.
Yeah.
Clubs, and this is something that we are helping them as well. And we are putting together a way also to attract philanthropists, because this is a big journey, as you say. And anyone that want to participate somehow in promoting more artists, giving artists the possibility to tour in more and to appreciate. This is another way we are working, and the aficionados and the people around the jazz can support us. Also, all about jazz website is a big of support, and this kind of prize that we are receiving is recognition. And we've been only over 3 years in this work, and being a part of this community is a good recognition for us. Or it is a part of everything. We have contributors. They come in, they want to write and to comment. We continue being more kind of ingrained in the jazz scene, but it's completely dispersed, and it's difficult to frame the people and to make them be part of it. So making subscribers is always complicated in whatever genre. We are television people, we know it.
Yeah.
We are not surprised of it. So we are committed to go into the different ways of exploitation to give this beautiful content, the magic that is happening that night, to be recognized and valuable, and to the artist receive an important part of what is worth for that.
While OJazz connects global audiences to local jazz clubs, our next guest focuses on rebuilding global jazz culture for local audiences. Thomas Marriott founded Seattle Jazz Fellowship to address a decline in performance and mentoring opportunities in Seattle's scene. He also sought to create a sustainable home for live music in Pioneer Square, Seattle's oldest neighborhood. Here's Thomas Marriott. Tell our listeners a little bit about your organization and what you do, specifically the mission and what drove you to get started.
Sure. Seattle Jazz Fellowship is a nonprofit organization founded in 2021. Our mission is to build community, to increase mentorship, to incentivize excellence, and to lower barriers to access jazz for artists and for listeners alike. We accomplish this mission by promoting 6 nights a week of live local jazz and other events in our own venue in Pioneer Square, which is a historical jazz area of Seattle, Washington's downtown. Like a lot of people, during the pandemic, it was kind of a time of reflection. And as being a local artist in Seattle, being a local jazz musician in Seattle had just become increasingly untenable by the time the pandemic rolled around. So I did a lot of thinking about where we got off the rails, what it was like when it was better and what it's like in other places where there's a better jazz community. Wages had just been stagnant or had gotten lower. There were no venues to play. There weren't gigs that paid money. The people who were sort of in charge of the venues and booking and things like that didn't really have the best interest of the music in mind. They, I think, were concerned more about promoting their organizations than the music itself. And I think this is one of the things that had led to a reduction in audience a reduction in the professional class of jazz musicians in Seattle. So there aren't any anymore. There are no full-time jazz musicians in Seattle anymore. Everybody's a teacher or has something else that they do to make income.
Wow.
And so without a professional class of performers, the level of music continued to slide from the 80s and 90s to kind of where we are. And so also the oversized impact of jazz education in Seattle. The media, it caught the media's eye, and I think they sort of took their eye off the local community of musicians because the local jazz high school programs had gotten so much attention, and rightfully so. I mean, they deserve all of that, no question about it, but not to the exclusion of the local performers and the local community. There's not even really, or hasn't been for a long time, really an infrastructure for promoting a gig in Seattle if you're a local jazz performer. So venues, no elders, low wages, low opportunity. If you're a fan and you want to hear great jazz music, you got to go to Jazz Alley or pay a high ticket, concert ticket price, and that's out of the reach for a lot of people, especially musicians. So a confluence of problems that have eroded our jazz community locally over time. And so our mission is basically set up to provide the conditions that will allow the music to thrive. And these are conditions that existed before, but also they are conditions that exist in other jazz communities that are more successful, that are more robust. So we look at the first part of our mission, which is community. Building community. And that means a lot of things. That's building the audience for sure, but that's also engaging all these little scenes in Seattle. So we have what we kind of gotten into is everybody plays with their friends and nobody gets any better because there's not a lot of intermingling. These people hang over there, these people hang over there. So a lot of little scenes, not much community. So we try to create a place, a space that's inclusive to everyone that calls themselves a jazz artist and to focus on that and to that exclusively. So in other words, we don't do jazz adjacent music. We just do jazz music. And so it kind of makes the community self-identifying, but also, how do we build community? We have to show up for community, but there has to be something to show up to. So we have been trying to provide events and spaces for the jazz community to show up to gather in community, because we don't have a space since Tula's closed and since the New Orleans closed and since Laferno's closed and since all these places closed. We need that home base, so that we can have community. So that's the first part. The second part is mentorship. We are in a community without a lot of elders, or at least without a lot of elders that want to take responsibility for that position. Grooming the next crop of elders, honestly. I think some of the people have kind of abdicated their responsibility for the next generations because honestly, they're still trying to make a living, still trying to make a name for themselves because it's just gotten so much harder. So they're still working and they don't have the kind of comfortability to I think, be more concerned with others,
Yeah.
They're still trying to eke it out. And I appreciate that. I mean, a lot of it is an economic situation in Seattle, ninth most expensive city in the world. So rent has gone up, wages for musicians down, commercial rent, very sky high. These are the issues that affect our community. The elders in our community, we really got to put them on display, especially the really old elders like Julian Priester. He's 90 and has a lot of wisdom to share, but also was like sitting at home, because he wasn't really performing that much. But that also means people like Jay Thomas and Phil Sparks and the other 70-plus-year-olds in our community who, when I was coming up on the scene, those elders were really visible. You had access to them. They would tell you stuff if you wanted, and it just but holding the bar high was they were out there doing that. Now they're not so much because there's no place for them to play. Now there is, so that's part of our thing about mentorship is that we need a community where the young musicians are wanting to learn from the older musicians and the older musicians are wanting to pass on to the younger musicians. It's a whole cycle that has kind of broken down. The young musicians who are great in the high school programs, they don't really see that there's anything more for them to learn in our community until they move away. And they might be right about that. So we're trying to change that so we can have some retention and some of those great players stay here and experience and are able to learn and grow from the elders that are here. Incentivizing excellence, well, that's basically comes down to pay. Who's going to spend the extra time? Who's going to go the extra mile? Who's going to write that extra project? Who's going to rehearse that band more for a gig that pays maybe $50 a person that you might get to do one time? It's a lot of work for not a lot of reward, or even just keeping a band together over years, weeks, months, whatever. There's no opportunity for that either. So of course the music is going to be mediocre. And there are a lot of reasons why wages have stagnated over time. But I think for the large part, some of the bigger institutions have sort of been of the mentality, and this is not a local problem, this is a problem everywhere. We're going to pay the local musicians the least amount of money we can get away with paying them.
Yeah.
Because we need all this extra money for the out-of-town musicians. Well, I appreciate that. There needs to be a balance. And we're not going to have a professional class if local musicians can't make a professional wage. So with the lessening of wages over time, the music has lessened over time because people aren't spending as much time at it because they have to make money doing other things. And the access part, well, like I mentioned, if you're a fan of the music, you want to hear something excellent, it's a very high price tag that's attached to that. And so if you want to really create a pipeline for musicians, we have to make the music accessible. If it only exists in the classroom for people, then it's totally an abstraction. It's totally an academic experience. It has to exist in the real world somewhere. You know, what are they all studying in school? It has to be somewhere. In Seattle prior to 2021, it wasn't anywhere. Well, there was no real local jazz thing happening here. Pockets, little bits here and there, but nothing centralized or organized enough that was attractive for people to really want to participate in. So that's what we're trying to get at. That's what they have in other cities. They have communities where musicians hang out with each other, where elders participate in learning with younger musicians, where there's gigs that pay money, a place to gather, where there is incentive to get better, and where the ability to get a gig is not dependent on how many people you can draw, but on your artistry. Those are the things we're trying to achieve.
That's a really sprawling mandate. There's a lot of components to it, as you just articulated. Something I'm curious about is the role of the physical space, because it really seems like it provides a very tangible foundation for what you're doing, and the space itself is a through line across a lot of the elements you just articulated. Could you tell me a little bit about the importance of having the physical home base versus being an organization that's putting shows all over the place?
I think if you expect people to show up over the long term, having a space is really important for the predictability of like, where are we going to be? You know, where are we going to gather? What we want is a space where if you're a jazz musician or even just a jazz fan or participant in community, that when you go there, you see somebody you know, or somebody that is a friend of a friend. You know, that's the fellowship part. And I think this is why Seattle Jazz Fellowship, that's why we use that name, because, you know, for most of us, we're not playing the music for money. We need money to live, but we're not in it for the money. We're in it for the spiritual rewards, fellowship being one of those rewards. If there's no place to engage in fellowship, there's no fellowship, there's no spiritual reward. So then why are we doing it? So yeah, you're absolutely right, having a physical space. Now we can create space though a lot of different ways and in a lot of different places. I think we were doing well when we were doing sort of pop-up at Vermilion, but again, it was regular enough and constant enough that people knew where to find it. And I think that's what we want, is we want people to be able to find it on a moment's notice, not 3 months from now, it's going to happen here, or next week it'll be happening here. But where can I go tonight to get that? Where can I go right now and engage in community and fellowship and hear some jazz? In a lot of cities, that's not even a question. If you're a jazz fan stepping off a plane in Philly, you know where you're going. Atlanta, you know where you're going. New York City, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, in Seattle, if you get to step off the plane and you're a jazz fan, you go, I want to go hear some jazz. Jazz Alley would be where most people will go. It might be jazz that night. It might be Confunction, you know, or Tower of Power. That might not be what you're looking for. And because those shows are so expensive, you also might not find the people you're looking for either.
Yeah, it's really interesting that when you talk about physical space, you quickly talk about consistency, and that having the physical space sort of allows you, for lack of a better way to say it, to control the consistency. You have a consistent space you can program. You're not working around other promoters, other bookers who have other priorities. It's fascinating.
Mhm.
Given how sprawling the mandate is and all the different components of it that you articulated, could you tell me a little bit about, like, what does success look like for you? Because I'd imagine there's a long-term success where you could look back and say, we scaled the mountain. But what are the successes along the way that either keep you going or help you just measure, like, am I doing a good job? I'm busy, but am I accomplishing stuff? You know, what's a success?
I think there's a lot of markers for success in what we're doing. I think the fact that we have a 5-year lease on our own permanent home in the exact neighborhood, in the exact building that we want to be in, and that we're full every single night, and that our audience is mostly 25-year-olds and mostly female, is a huge sign of our success. I don't know how else we could put it. I think I have I mean, I'm probably overstating it, but I believe we are running the most popular jam session in the United States. I would challenge anybody, prove me wrong, and show up to my jam session and tell me it's not the most popular jam in the United States right now. It's something to behold. I'm not saying that I'm taking credit for it either, but it's just something that has happened. And I think that that's a part of the key to our success is we're trying to make jazz, local jazz especially, fun. Make it appealing to the audience. I mean, I think we do all of our work from the point of view of the musician, which is what's good for the music, what's good for the audience. That's pretty much it. That's our whole yardstick about what we do. On the other hand, there's sort of the more concrete terms. Like this year alone, I paid out more than $200,000 in artist fees to local musicians. Since 2021, I've raised more than $1 million for the local community. I've produced, as an organization, we produce more than 500 local jazz events since 2021. We have registered thousands of members. We right now currently have a little over 800 active members for this year, and we're on with a goal of reaching 1,000 just in this year. But that's consistent over the last few years. So I think that our Jazz Night in Pioneer Square event, thousands of people show up to hear bands, and all the bands get paid well. We've been written up in the New York Times, all manners of local media. So I mean, there's a lot of like the little cookies of success. And I think those are all great, that the money continues to come in, people continue to show up, artists want to play, that the music gets better. I think those are, and when people come to play at the fellowship, they do their best work. I think those are all huge markers of our success. We have more work to do, lots more work to do. I won't be happy till I see that there's like 10 to 20 local jazz musicians sitting in the audience every single night. That's my wish. You know what I mean? I don't think we'll ever really get there, but that's my goal. And we twist arms for people to participate in community. If you want a gig at the fellowship, you got to show up. You have to attend a show somebody else. And that's true for people all the way to the top to all the way to the bottom.
You talked about Pioneer Square, the space, the neighborhood, the building, like it's pretty incredible. You could pinpoint on the map the importance of Pioneer Square in Seattle's development and Seattle jazz development. So here we are, a quarter of the way through the 21st century. How do you see your organization's role in sort of the cultural fabric of that specific place, not just Seattle, but Pioneer Square? How important is it to you, and how important are you to it?
I would let other people answer the second part of that question. I wouldn't want to state our own importance in the community. I know for us, it's really important for us to be there for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I think one is that it's centrally located, and in terms of our mission of being accessible, it's easily to get there by bus, light rail, all of those things. So it's easy to get to. I think it's not super far from the south. It's not super far. If you live in the north or the south end, it's equidistant. It's close to I-90 if you live on the east side. If you take the ferry from Vashon or Bainbridge, you can get off and walk to the club. It's very, very accessible location, but also it's beautiful. Pioneer Square is beautiful urban setting. Yeah, there's the elements that people like to see, because a lot of social services are down there, missions and service centers and things like that. So yeah, that's part of it. That's what makes it great. Yeah, that's what makes it Pioneer Square. But also the old architecture. And, when there's people getting drunk in the alley behind the club, I see those folks and I'm like, yeah, people have been getting drunk in that alley for 150 years. Some things don't change about Seattle. And as a Seattleite, I like that. But also as a teenager, I used to hang right a block away from where we are set up now. And I used to walk by the space we're in and go, that would be such a cool place for a jazz club.
That's beautiful.
Now I have a key and I run jazz 6 nights a week there. That's a blessing. I don't know how, it's a gift. It's a gift. I didn't earn or deserve it. You know what I mean? It's just a gift. So I'm going to take care of it.
Yeah, no, that is really a beautiful element of the story. That sort of lifelong connection.
I mean, I never wanted to own a jazz club. Let me just put it that way. That was never part of my dream. Living in Seattle, being a jazz musician in Seattle has kind of come to suck. And how do we make the conditions for being a jazz musician in Seattle better? How do we make jazz a bigger part of the cultural community of Seattle? And I think to answer the question you asked, maybe just a little bit, I think when we think about outdoor festivals in Seattle, when we think about My City of Music, which was an initiative of the mayor's office a few years ago, when we think about nightlife, we're not really thinking about or talking about jazz music as part of that. We're talking about restaurants. We're talking about the Crocodile. We're talking about, the Triple Door. We're talking about all these venues that don't really present jazz so much. We're talking about the symphony. We're talking about the opera. When people talk about culture in Seattle, we're not almost ever talking about local jazz. Yet we have one of the better jazz communities on the West Coast. I think one thing that we may have contributed to is that now people consider local jazz part of the local art scene. And I think it's an undeniable part, especially with our Jazz Walk in Pioneer Square. I think people were kind of astonished how many people will come out for local jazz. It's free, and I recognize that part of what we're doing is we're appealing to a demographic with our business model that's very attractive to them. If you're 25 and you live in the ninth most expensive city in the world, and you have that kind of uncertain income like 25-year-olds do, there's nothing hip to do in Seattle that's free. Walk in the park and the outdoors. That's what you get. So we have 3 nights a week of free local jazz in our really low pressure, hip jazz room in Pioneer Square. People love it. And I think for that reason alone, but hey, you know what? They show up, they listen, they applaud. It gives our audience, our musicians an audience to play for that responds and reacts. It's probably the best thing that's happened to jazz locally in a long time. Not the musicians, not our work, the audience, what they have brought to the music and the music scene in Seattle. We provided events for them to show up too, but that they've shown up in droves and are enthusiastic. I think that's where the real change has been, is with the audience.
Yeah. I love hearing the demographic anecdotes you shared. I mean, that's the future.
It's nuts. It is absolutely the future. It's the present. I don't know about the future. It's the present,
There you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go. As you were putting the fellowship together organizationally, might there have been a figure or an era or an institution that you looked to as sort of inspiration, or even, something that you said, oh, I liked what that person did, or I liked what that organization did? Were you pulling from other strands, or did you have to invent this from whole cloth?
No, definitely not from whole cloth. I think I was definitely inspired in part by what some organizations were doing, and I was definitely inspired to do similarly. And I think there were other organizations that inspired me to do exactly the opposite of what they were doing.
There you go.
If I had an organization to run, I would do it totally different from them, So what they did was an example of what not to do. So obviously, since we're sort of a presenting organization, and small and community focused and locally focused, Smalls is where we take a lot of our inspiration. Smalls Jazz Club in New York, because it's such a community space, and it's always been a community space. So we do take a lot of cues from what they do, but as a business model, we do things totally differently. So like the membership model, for instance, I played at Mary Ann's Jazz Room in Bern, Switzerland a couple of years back, and they have a membership model. It's a lot more expensive than our model. If it's a few $100s per year, the club is really nice. And like Thursday night is members night. So if your membership allows you to come in, have a couple of drinks as part of your membership, premier access. Then the rest of the nights you get discount if you want to come back, but are ticketed for the general public. And that struck me as like a true jazz club, what I mean? A club of people mutually supporting the music through their patronage. That was definitely something that I always thought would be it's not that much different from a subscriber model. But I think also the nonprofit model absolutely was the way that I always wanted to go, because the only way we make money anymore is by performing. Records, recording, all that's, it's not really a thing. Yet almost always now, at least in Seattle, we're required to work for the door, a percentage of the door, a percentage of ticket sales. But could you imagine a symphony musician or somebody who plays for the opera orchestra or the ballet, somebody who's like a Seattle Mariner working for a percentage of ticket sales? First of all, ticket sales don't cover all the expenses of those organizations. They need grant money, and they need corporate sponsorship, and they need donors. Why shouldn't jazz take advantage of that same exact apparatus? We need all those things too, because for local jazz, especially, the audience is never going to be that big, paying audience anyway. So we need all of those same resources to make it viable. And so definitely taken a page out of their book.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. That's a powerful insight and realization to apply.
The jazz club, dinner club model, like say Jazz Alley or whatever, it's just not doable really in Seattle anymore, because a restaurant, you could have 35 tables, but you sell those tables maybe 3, 4, 5 times in a night. So you could sell 250 dinners in a night with only 35 tables, let's say. For a jazz club, you only sell that table one time. So if you want to sell 300 dinners, you need 300 seats. And that's a big club. And if you have a big club, that's a lot of rent, a lot of labor, a lot of overhead. And for local jazz, it's just never going to be viable. Rent is just too high.
And that ends up dictating the programming.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Before I let you go, can you tell me a little bit about, to the extent that you're comfortable, what might be next? What are some things you're working on? What are you excited about? Or is it just, keeping the organization stable and doing more of the same? How are you thinking about, the next interval of Seattle Jazz Fellowship?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot. We just moved into our full-time home this year. So we've realized a long-term goal of having a permanent location this year.
Amazing.
We've expanded our programming this month from 3 or 4 nights a week to 6 nights a week every week until the end of the year. We'll re-examine that programming then. So we have established our full-time mentorship program called the Fellowship Futures, which is a band that we run. That's just getting off the ground this year. So I think this is the year, we grew 300% from 2023 to 2024. And I'm not sure exactly what the growth number is for this year, but everything went up, the number of shows, everything. So we're at a point now where, yes, definitely we are most interested in just kind of making sure we can maintain all the programming that we're doing right now and taking a breath. But we have some things we're looking at. The popularity of Jazz Night in Pioneer Square kind of surprised everybody. We are definitely interested, probably not this year because FIFA, the World Cup's got events happening in Pioneer Square alongside baseball, alongside other stuff. So summertime's kind of a busy time in Pioneer Square. But perhaps the following year, we are interested in producing a larger festival, a larger local festival with a little more civic tie-in, among other things.
From Seattle's year-round jazz hub, we turn to Ireland, where Eddie Lee transforms the town of Sligo into a vibrant jazz education festival each July. The Sligo Jazz Project brings together world-class faculty and students of all ages for an immersive week of workshops, concerts, and jam sessions. And now, Eddie Lee. I would like to start by asking you to introduce your organization to us, tell us about your mission, and tell us how you got started.
Well, Sligo Jazz Project is basically an organization run by musicians for musicians. It grew out of a large dearth in music education in this part of the world. So we had the idea through a friend of ours who was a music educator and a Berkeley graduate from Sligo, Mike Nielsen, great jazz guitarist. We asked Mike, would he bring a few people to Sligo to do workshops so we could learn how to play jazz, basically. And it was a selfish enough effort at the beginning. And then we realized there's lots of people like us who came to the events that we organized. So yeah, I suppose our mission is to bring world-class musicians to this small town in the west of Ireland, educate and inspire and entertain, obviously. Yeah, it started 20 years ago this year. In fact, this month, 20 years ago, we organized our first event.
Wow. So
the summer school then started a year later in 2006. And we've been on an amazing trajectory since.
What does success look like for you? Do you have, 20 years is quite a body of work and accomplishment, I would imagine. When you look back, or even when you look back over smaller periods of time, maybe at the end of every year, how do you measure success? And do you have maybe a story or two you could tell to illustrate some of the programs or some of the successes along the way?
Yeah, I suppose I would measure success in seeing a new generation of musicians that we have had a positive effect on, especially those who are local guys who came to our summer school, or girls when they were in their teens, maybe in their mid-teens, 14 or 15, having never played a jazz note in their life, and are now basically caught the jazz bug from us, came back another year and the following year, whatever. And now a lot of those guys are actually on our faculty every year and teaching a new generation of musicians. So, and they're still only in their 20s. So it's really, that's the most rewarding thing. And that for me that's how I measure success in terms of what we do with Sligo Jazz Project. And I think any musician that is from this part of the world that can actually make a living from music, that's a success because it's not easy to make a living from music anywhere. But I think if you're in the west of Ireland, it's a rare thing to be a working musician.
Yeah.
Having said that, Sligo is an extraordinary place for music and arts. It's like a magnet for artists and musicians. And a lot of amazing traditional Irish musicians live here and work here and base themselves here. Obviously, we all have to tour abroad if we want to make some money, but it is a great place. There's an amazing music community here in Sligo. So that's also something that I would measure our success on, in being a part of that and having contributed to that amazing community we have here.
What would you say it is about the program specifically leads to this sort of that ongoing engagement and these sort of musical breakthroughs that the participants are having? My understanding is you've started in some cases with students who really never played a note of jazz before, but as you said, have gone on to be accomplished either as professional musicians or educators, and that seems to speak to something special in the program.
Yeah, I guess what we've never done is audition. We've never had, there's a lot of summer schools, I think, the likes of Siena, and I'm not sure, I know there's some other schools as well that if you want to go to them, you have to send audition tapes and, you have to be above a certain standard. We've never done that. And we don't want to do that. It's actually not what we're about at all. And I suppose if I'd have to go back to sort of my youth when I think about how I came to music, it was purely from the love of it. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, right? When music lessons in Sligo, in this small town, consisted of a local piano teacher who was an old lady who hit you over the knuckles with a ruler if you played a wrong note.
Yep.
And that wasn't my bag. So I never actually had any formal music education at all. And then I remember going to my career guidance teacher in school, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm interested in science, but I love music." And he says, "Well, you can't do both. They're totally unrelated. Would you make your mind up?" kind of thing. That's how our career guidance thing was operating at that time. So I ended up doing a science degree and never doing anything with it because I started to learn an instrument around then, and I ended up playing music before I left college even, but I did graduate, but I just, I kind of went straight into a rock band. We were writing our own material and it was a very exciting time. It was very great creative outlet. And we were one of those kind of wannabe bands one of those almost made it bands that operated for about 7 years in my 20s. And I had a lot of fun doing it. But, when that finished, I guess I had to get to broaden my horizons musically. And I actually went back in my late 20s and early 30s to actually learn music theory for the very first time, because I was totally a self-taught player. I just learned by listening to records and trying to figure stuff out on the bass. And I grew up listening to Frank Zappa and sort of jazz fusion. When I was 16, I first heard Frank Zappa on the John Peel show on BBC Radio on medium wave. So I used to go to sleep on my school nights listening to John Peel, and it was an amazing experience. I heard some incredible music. So I think that's always stayed with me, that I never had an opportunity really to learn music theory and to learn to get all the tools that you need to be a musician that can walk into any situation. I think what jazz education does is it gives you those tools to go to any situation, whether it's a reading situation, an orchestra piece, big band, rock sessions, pop sessions. The jazz education gives you the tools you need to survive in any of those places. And obviously it also gives you a lot of tools for composing, which is, we started to do a lot of focus on that in the last number of years. We've had some amazing people like Brian Byrne, the Irish composer. We've had Elio Villafranca, people like that who are well-known, well-renowned composers, and they've done workshops about composition as well. So that's another thing we've really enjoyed bringing to people here, because it has been very inspiring. It's a very inspiring thing when, for example, we had Brian Byrne I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work. He's done a lot. He does a lot of movie soundtracks and stuff, but he's an incredible jazz pianist. He did a composition workshop one morning at the college that when we did a summer school or jazz camp, I think they call it in America. And Brian had people crying in his workshop because basically he said, "I want somebody shout a note." He got 3 people to shout 3 notes, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to write a melody with those 3 notes." And he wrote a melody, and then he varied the theme using the same phrase but with slightly different rhythm. And he wrote this beautiful piece of music in front of our eyes, and it was just quite an emotional experience for everybody that was at it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think that those are the kind of things that really inspire the people who come to our events. When something that's just a one-off thing that happens, and then of course that evening, Brian is probably going to be jamming with some of the other guys that he's never met in his life. Other magic happens, you know. So and that's the other thing about. I think the great thing about jazz, learning a jazz repertoire and learning to play jazz is that you can walk into any room with a bunch of musicians and join them, and you'll always have some tunes in common, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to communicate instantly with others musically.
Eddie, tell me a little bit, if you would, about the actual summer school, sort of the mechanics of it. How long does the session, if that's what you refer to it as, last? You know, how long is the term of the summer school?
Yeah.
I think you gave a little bit of a hint, but what's a day in the life of a student?
Yeah, so it's 6 days actually, is every July. That's it. We've toyed with the idea of making it longer, but I think it's to do it within a week. People need to travel day before and after. To have sort of an 8-day thing, getting here and getting home again, that's probably enough, as much as most people can make in their summer, you know. So what happens is we have morning workshops, which could be on a variety of things, and the tutors basically, we assemble a faculty probably a year in advance or a year and a half in advance. The organization is funded by the Arts Council and summer school fees, basically. That it's sort of between the Arts Council grant and our summer school fees, it would cover, I would say, 80% of what our required budget is. And this year we had our biggest faculty ever. We had 33 tutors, musicians and tutors. And so they would basically we'd ask for volunteers to do morning workshops. So there'd be an hour in the morning or an hour and a bit in the morning, which would consist of, could be ear training, could be rhythm training, could be transcription, people talking about their favorite solos that they may have transcribed when they were learning their chops. And
Yeah.
Some of those have been very interesting too. And sometimes we have a band in residence. For example, a few years back, we had The Impossible Gentleman with Steve Rodby, the great bassist and producer, Gwilym Simcock, amazing pianist, both of whom would be renowned for their work with Pat Metheny. Adam Nussbaum, drummer, now based in Philadelphia, amazing guy too. And another Brit or two, sort of an international super group, I guess. They did some fabulous morning workshops as a group and talking about how they interact. And I mean, to get up and get into a college at 10 in the morning and see these guys playing and talking about their music, it's a real treat. And we've done that with lots of other people since as well. So that's kind of what would happen in the mornings. And then there's a master class before lunch. So everybody gets divided up into their instruments, and there would be somewhere between sort of 2 and 6 tutors on each instrument. So depending on the numbers for each instrument, that's something we always have to juggle with as well. It's very difficult because we haven't so far limited numbers except on one instrument because there's always too many piano players. But we've had to limit piano players because the reason for trying to have a sort of an equal division of people on instruments is for the ensemble sessions. And they're the most important of the whole lot, really. The ensembles happen every afternoon on the summer school, 2-hour sessions, sort of from 2 to 4. The tutors lead. Tutors get divided up per ensembles, and all the participants are divided into bands or ensembles. So it's difficult when there are 30-odd piano players and there's only 9 bass players or 10 bass players in the school. We had 150 people on the summer school this year. It was our biggest ever. So it's difficult to juggle. As it gets bigger, it's difficult to juggle. So we're anticipating having to actually limit the numbers next year. It's kind of reached capacity. And certainly we will be limiting piano players. So piano players, if you're listening, you've got to get your booking done quick because it will sell out. That's basically how the school part of it works. But I think the unique thing about Sligo is that after the summer school every day, everybody heads over town. It's a small town. It's 15 minutes walk from the college to the center of town. So everything is walkable. And there's a lot of live music in town. A lot of it is the tutors, mostly. In fact, it's nearly the last few years have been pretty much like 95% of the people performing at the festival have been the guys who are coming, and the amazing artists that are coming to teach. This year we had a really strong female faculty as well. We had Sasha Berliner, the amazing vibraphone player from San Francisco. We had a Korean drummer called Sun Mi Hong, who's started to win a lot of awards now in Europe. She's based in the Netherlands. Oh, we had a few fantastic singers as well. Veronica Morsher. We had, I should have my program here in front of me so I could list them out, but we had, I suppose, 14 countries or something represented just in the tutors alone. And about the same, I'd say, in terms of people coming to the summer school. So that there's sort of jam sessions, concerts. There's twice daily jam sessions for the participants as well, before and after the main concert. And then there's a main concert every evening in the local theatre, the Hawkswell, which features the tutors in various formats. Sometimes we might have a band in resident, but otherwise it's literally, I have the job of asking people to play together who may not have played together before. Obviously, there's a lot of toing and froing. Who would you like to play with? Blah, blah, blah. This year, of course, everybody wanted to play with Rufus Reid. Rufus was our guest of honor, and Rufus is a true bass legend and also an amazing human being. So it was such a treat to have him back. And one of his proteges, Freddie Hendricks, who's a wonderful trumpet player from New Jersey, from the same town as Rufus, in fact. So we brought a little bit of T-neck New Jersey to Sligo this year.
Tell me a little bit about the relationship with Sligo, because as I was listening to you speak, I was thinking, wow, what a treat for the town to have this week or so of all these incredible musicians converge from around the world. Is there a relationship with the town? How is the festival component and all of the evening performances? How is that received by the townspeople? Are you engaging with the townspeople, or is it mainly the student body?
Yeah, no, it's the town people, the people from Sligo as well. In fact, I think somebody remarked a few years ago that it's unlike any other summer school that they've taught at, or jazz camp or whatever that they've taught at, because it's so immersed in the community here, and all of the jam sessions are open to the public, so anybody can go and see them, and they're free. And also all of the afternoon sessions that we have each afternoon. So there's a local pub, 4:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, people pouring out of it, after hearing some of the greatest jazz musicians on the planet. And that's a rare thing for a small town in the west of Ireland. And I think Sligo people really do appreciate it. And I think a lot of people in the local authority here are starting to cotton on as well. So we're getting a little bit of funding from the local authority as well, the county council here in Sligo, and some national funding as well from the tourism board here at Fáilte Ireland. But yeah, it's a struggle. The funding thing is it takes up, I'd say, a good third of my year every year trying to raise funds. It's one of the necessary evils, I'm afraid, is going out with the hat begging people for money. But it's so rewarding when it comes to the end of the week and you have people coming up to you
Beautiful.
saying they had the best week of their lives, and a lot of kids as well. We had I'd say in the last few years we probably had 50 out of the 140 or 50 people that come to the summer school have been 18 or under. So there's a big interest from young people now in the music, and
Yeah.
the only thing I wish for would be to be able to do something throughout the year that would keep the interest going for the younger kids. And I've been applying for funding. I haven't got it yet. Applying for extra funding for sort of a year-round program to allow the younger participants on summer school that they can have a forum to have some jams and in a safe space to do that locally in Sligo, and hopefully that'll happen in the next year. We'll get that going.
That actually dovetailed into the final question I wanted to ask you, which was if you could tell me a little bit about what would be next in terms of the vision or your to-do list for the organization. And if what you just said answered that, great. If there was something else you wanted to add, I'd love to hear it. And then maybe also as part of that, if you could let us know where listeners should go if they want to support or get more information about the organization.
Sure. Well, that's easy. I'll answer the second question first. That's sligojazz.ie is the website. And you can get in touch with us via that as well. I would say in terms of, I don't think we'd be doing any expansion in terms of the size of the actual main event in the summer, but I would like to expand in terms of a year-round program. And we just haven't been successful to get enough funding to do that. So we have to concentrate on the summer school, the one thing that we're doing, which is really the most valuable thing that we've been at and what we formed in the first place to do, obviously. So we've got to concentrate on that. And I suppose the other thing would be to have what you were saying would be to do the year-round program for the young people as well, for young musicians. And also I would like to bring the festival a little bit more into the community and have more free events in the town. There's a couple of new spaces that are opening in the town, outdoor spaces. The logistics of running anything outdoors in the west of Ireland is not, it's pretty difficult because of the weather, obviously. It has been done quite successfully in some places, and you do need covered areas, obviously. So we're working on that, and it would be lovely to run a free concert at some part of the week in the actual middle of town, in the middle of Sligo. And that's definitely on the to-do list.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like such a terrific program and a fun way to spend 6 days. I hope that I make it to Western Ireland one of these days and check it out. That sounds so wonderful.
Yeah, please do. And if anybody wants to see what it's like, actually, you can also go to our YouTube channel, which is just Sligo Jazz, SLIGOJAZZ. That's we've got some lovely videos there, happy musicians and concert goers. So a mixture of vox pop and some clips from concerts and stuff as well.
Thank you so much, Jazz Forward Award winners Eddie Lee, Thomas Marriott, Jesús Perezagua, and Ed Trefzger. And of course, thank you, Michael Ricci at All About Jazz. Michael is the OG of putting jazz forward. And thank you for tuning into the Tonearm. If you enjoyed this conversation, you'll like at least one more of the nearly 300 episodes available in our free archive at thetonearm.com. The Tonearm is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Theme music is by Birdie, spelled B-U-R-D-Y. The single best way you can support us is by sharing us with at least one friend. I hope you'll do that today. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.